have an answer for that, John. So the fighting ring at the end where Snake fights Ox in the
That's
ring.
a set.
Yeah,
right?
So that was a building. It was just a husk of a building. And Joe Alves was like, yeah, I didn't have to do much. He's like, it was already crappy looking, so we just put a ring in there. He's like, it was the best build I've ever had in my life. They just added a lot of smoke. They said it was bad because they had to add all the smoke to kind of add, a look and atmosphere to it. But yeah, so a lot of the times, a lot of the streets and a lot of the places they shot in were just broken down already. There were a few sets that they built, but for the most part, everything was just so burnt or kind of tore up, they just had to throw a bunch of crap on the ground from dump trucks.
The train yard. That looks really good.
The train yard was cool. I think there's a parked train there. Do you call it park train? Do trains park? John, you're the train expert.
They come to a
I'm
stop.
the train expert?
John, you've watched Under Siege 2 7 times, so I think you're the train expert here.
That actually might not be wrong. But it was all within a couple years of it coming out.
Got it. It looks. The sets look great. I mean, they couldn't afford to shoot in New York. They did 2 days in New York total, and then the rest of New York was the miniatures that they built. The Skotak brothers and James Cameron helped. He'd painted some stuff, John. So the matte paintings in this, James Cameron did a couple.
Like with the helicopter going around with the bridge, searching towards the beginning, right? Things like that.
And I figured out how they did water and their miniatures that they had, and they had a lot of freedom to shoot all the miniatures and all the planes, and they didn't have enough money for a lot of stuff. Megan said, would you find that research about the tape?
Oh, yeah, the computer graphics when Snake is flying the drone or the plane or the glider, whatever it was, he is zooming in on where to land, and it looks like outlines of a building in a computer program, but I read that they didn't have enough money to use a computer program, so they just created a model, and they put white tape on it, and then filmed as if they filmed over the top of it.
Oh, that's great. They were so creative on this movie, John. It makes me so happy.
So the only scene in New York was what? The part where
Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, from the Liberty Island.
Mm-hmm. That was it.
Which is now their command center for controlling their prison Manhattan.
Oh, I love it. I love the idea. I love all the George Romero references, the crazies, and then even Romero. Would you guys hire Romero as your right-hand man?
As my right-hand man? I want to hire him to be in charge.
So, yeah, you would hire I love Romero. Would you hire Romero to be your bodyguard?
I'd be too afraid he might kill me. Just because he has a break.
He's so soft-spoken, though.
Yeah. I like his hair. He's very theatrical, and I dig it. And I don't like when he gets stabbed, but so when he gets stabbed, John Carpenter, after his death, he goes, and Carpenter's like, he made some choices on that one.
Yeah, I saw a real short interview where he was just saying he internalized the character, and all of that came naturally, and they just let him do it.
I mean, Romero's great. He's very theatrical, and and Oscar Hayes. Kurt Russell was saying that him and Oscar used to work out in the morning. Oh, Isaac Hayes. Why did I say Oscar? Isaac Hayes. Oscar Isaac?
Well,
I mix them up. So yeah, Isaac Hayes, they would work out in the morning. I don't know. This is one of those movies that I think it's aged really well because of all the practical effects. I mean, John, how many times have you watched this, and do you feel it aging at all?
So, it's funny. I thought that I'd seen it a lot more than I had. I saw this loads of times in the late 80s and then Columbia House Video era.
Oh yeah.
That my uncle got it, and we probably watched that 5 or 8 times just with him. And then sometime after Escape from LA came out, I must have blurred a lot of times that I was really watching Escape from LA, because now that was a more popular TV showing, right? Mm-hmm. Syndication. And I was blurring that with my Escape from New York watching. So it's like when I watched this recently, I was very surprised at some of the scenes that weren't in it. Actually, I'm not kidding.
Where's Bruce Campbell?
I really thought the basketball scene, for example, was in both of them. So that's the level. And then when I saw him fight the huge guy, I'm like, wait, what? And then I'm like, oh, right. And then he's gonna have the axe with the nails. But at first I was dumbfounded. So this movie took me aback. I must not have seen it for 10 years. Wow. And I thought I saw it multiple times in the last 10 years. But truth be told, again, in total, I've probably seen this movie at least 10 times in a start to finish sitting.
Can I ask you guys a question? And so when I asked for questions, Norbert sent me a question, and he sent me one that I'm such a Snake fanboy that I didn't know if I could answer, but I'm kind of happy that Norbert sent it to me. So Norbert, sent me a question. He's like, do you ever notice how with even the badass stares and deadly silences, Snake Plissken is fairly incompetent? Do you get the vibe that Snake is incompetent in this movie?
I know exactly what he means. I'm not saying that I felt that, but when I watch the movie now and you think of the way that action stars evolved well after 1981, you know, they started to get good at everything in the late 80s. And then in the 90s, they were almost like everyone's an expert of everything, regardless of how the actor did. And then you get into the nowadays, and Vin Diesel's crew are superheroes.
Yeah. And
you know what I mean? Like,
Dwayne Johnson's flying every single airplane known to man.
Yeah.
Like if you have a crew of 5 people, there's no problem that someone isn't just going to be like, I got it. You know what I mean?
True.
Yeah.
I can fly this helicopter, no problem.
Yeah.
I think, though, that in the 80s watching this, I never would have thought that. I would have thought he was a tough guy doing what he had to with the skills that he had to make the best of a bad situation, right? But now, today, I get that criticism. You know what I mean? Only in the context of comparing it to more modern movies.
What do you think, Meg?
John has a point. It didn't come across to me as incompetent at all. He has a lot of situations. He tackles them. No one's ever dealt with what's on that island outside of the people that are there. So I think that it wasn't noticeable to me. When you say that kind of thing, I think of Jack Burton. I don't think of Snake Plissken.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the other thing, though, is that everything that I just said about the evolution of heroes applies to goons and applies to the bad guys in this movie as well. The bad guys were not organized. The bad guys were not terribly competent. The bad guys were never like, I got it. You know, they made a lot of mistakes too. This was more realistically fallible across the board. So your hero isn't perfect at everything. He's not Vin Diesel in Fast and the Furious 8. He's Vin Diesel in The Fast and the Furious.
Hey.
Where mistakes are made, and your crew of 5 people who become superheroes 6 movies later almost get totaled out by a trucker driving distracted with one hand and a sawed-off shotgun.
And Vince smiles at Brian at the end, and then Vince's car just wipes out. Or Dom Toretto's car. I'm calling him Vince? Jeez Louise. Dom Toretto's car just wipes out when it gets hit by the truck backing out. So, I mean, in this one, they lose to a trucker, and he flips his car. Like, he's really fallible in that movie. So
would you say that the stakes feel more real because it's more realistic? They're not superheroes?
I think so, and I think that's maybe why people like Snake, because he gets hired for this mission because he knows how to fly the plane. So I have the mission that he went on. He was on mission Gullfire in, Siberia? So he knew how to fly he knew how to fly the Gullfire. He was on a different mission. I have it around here somewhere. But so he's on a different mission. He lands that Gullfire on top of the World Trade Center. That's great, but he does it by almost crashing. And then later on, you know, he runs from the what are their names? The Crazies. Barely gets away. He needs some help on that. He gets caught while trying to rescue the president, but then he beats Slag. He wipes him out, and then he blows up the car, but that map was wrong. So I don't think he just doesn't dominate everything. I think do you think he has time for a plan? He just keeps moving forward. He doesn't really think. He's more about. He
doesn't know it's there. You know, he's got to figure out what the layout is and react really quickly. He can't take, you know, the time that Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible crew had to research things. Even when they were in a rush, they'd take like 6 or 8 hours of a sleepless night to put together a mask and get the voice modulation right and to get the schematics to someplace. Yeah. Snake has a total of 23 hours from the time that he left, right, to not die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if he takes too long, he dies anyway. And you know, we were talking about, you know, him having a tough time. You know, we always like to praise Die Hard because that's like the quintessential movie of the guy maintaining every injury he accumulates during the movie. Well, when Snake gets an arrow to the leg and there's a crossbow quarrel to the leg and there's 40 minutes left of that movie, he never misses a limp. He limps every damn step of that movie, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and so like, what other movies really make the effort to do that or take the risk of giving your hero a hobble so early and not in the final fight?
Jeez, I can't think of one. I was watching Fast Forward the other day. Dom Toretto. Jeez Louise. I'm mixing those up. But Dom
Vince
Toretto.
Diesel.
I think that since Vince Vaughn has had a couple super tough roles lately, you might be merging them.
Well, and
Man,
isn't Vince the guy in the fifth movie?
Yeah. So we just watched. So I'm blending everybody. But in the fourth one, Vin gets shot in the shoulder, and he shrugs it off.
That's the Mexico one,
Yeah.
right?
And then they're like, "We'll get you some help," and then we never hear about it again. So I'm kind of maybe, I don't know, Revenant. Does he just sort of grunts a lot and trudges along on that?
Yeah.
I can't think of one. I mean,
movies where people get really beat up.
I mean, we have a hero limping along, but Snake doesn't have time for plans. And in the commentary with John Carpenter, which I really liked, they said that he's a 15 seconds from now guy. he's not really thinking too far in the future.
That's kind of like someone who's always looking for their next 10-second car.
Yeah. Hey, you blew up my 10-second car. How about another one?
Ready or not, she suffers through.
Oh, yeah? She has her beat up hand.
And the rib cage scratch.
Oh, yeah. She has to deal with that. That's a good one.
Doesn't she roll an ankle at some point?
I don't know. We need more limping super action stars, John.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is in no way a negative criticism of Samara Weaving, but whatever injuries she took them in shockingly better stride than Snake took his injury.
Yeah. I mean,
that's just movie. It's cultivating a lot of excitement. Whereas Snake, he is limping. He is limping like a peasant running from smog before he blows fire down the Shire. He is struggling. He doesn't have a moment where he toughens up and doesn't feel the arrow anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's limping at the end.
Right. Every time you see him run, too, it's the same limp as when he first had. It's admirable that John Carpenter had him do that. And that, Kurt Russell wasn't huge then, but that Kurt Russell didn't resist it. But Kurt Russell never really struck me as having a lot of ego behind his characters.
Yeah, never. And we talked about that a lot on the Big Trouble in Little China commentary. And also, what's really interesting is, Megan did a bunch of research on this, too. This comes up on every article where they had worked on Elvis together, and Kurt really wasn't known as an action hero. Mm-hmm. And so when he cast him as Snake Plissken, people were like, what is happening? Why is the man who wore the tennis shoes an action hero? Why is Elvis playing Snake Plissken? But
didn't they want Tommy Lee Jones and a few other people?
Tough guys, chew on unlit cigars and I don't know, make them while smoke. I don't know. But yeah, so they cast him in here, but I think that's what makes it work, right? Is Kurt not having that ego, John? You think so?
I think, we've seen through his whole career, but I guess this was before we could have known that, right? But he's always been really good at embracing a character more than his fantasy of a character.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't.
He's always, people want to be their best self version of a thing, and he probably just heard what John Carpenter told him and read what was on the paper. It was like, I'm going to be that, and not necessarily the most glistening version of that I can be. Mm-hmm. Very sincere, the word you use a lot that feels perfect here, very earnest depiction, I think, of the character from paper to screen.
And I love and I also like that he's working opposite of Lee Van Cleef in this film, who starred with Clint Eastwood in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And then you have Kurt Russell doing a Clint Eastwood voice during that. But I love it when he says, "President of what?"
Right. And it's the best line.
And, I love that scene because they didn't have much money for this movie. And if you watch it, they shot a master of it with them kind of both in frame, and then they just did 2 other angles. So nowadays you have a lot more coverage on that, but I felt like it was the perfect amount. I feel like they hid their budget really well. And also, Megan and I were researching the low light lenses. Did you get what was Cundy saying about that?
Oh, that they just used special lenses in order to get the most light in the dark scenes.
And so John, this might make you say, "Oh my God!" But didn't they the f-stops were that much wider in the aperture, so they were able to get a lot more light into the lens?
Yeah, that's typically at least for digital cameras, that's how it works. I'd have to go in and look at the names on these, which I'd love to learn more about the actual cinematography of this movie, but that's got to be tough in these dark buildings, not great lighting, not a lot of budget. You probably bring in the best lens you can to get the footage. And I know that people say it's very gritty. I've seen a lot of articles say it's grimy.